Hello, my name's Paul Haig. This is a continuation from the previous video which showed the body shell of a Lotus Elan Series 2. In this video we'll look at all the body panels. Look at the panels. This is the bonnet. Took a long time to get to that finish. Turn it around. See more detail. The strengthening ribs I actually replaced because I worked on the top surface a lot to get it the right shape to clear the engine in the engine bay, because the original bonnet had distorted quite badly. I ended up putting these back in because they were cut out, and there was a metal bracket which I think was right for the later cars but not these earlier cars, so I hope I've got that right. I copied the detail off a good friend's Series 3 of a similar vintage. Those are where the stainless steel plates rivet that the bonnet runs on, and I've left the bolts in here at the moment, but those are bobbins with bolts in, which is where the two springs that lift the bonnet up attach. In the previous video I described fiberglass. This is chopped strand mat which goes in to making fiberglass, so there's a number of layers of this get used. It's got incredibly fine fibres. I mean, they look pretty coarse there, but each of those strands that you can see is made up of multiple very fine strands of glass fibre. And then there is tissue, which is similar but much finer. This would go just on the very top layer if you were making good a repair. And I also showed some fiberglass. That's a piece of polyester resin with a glass fibre embedded, and that's a piece of polyester resin without, so you can compare the two. So that's, just try and bend that to break it. You can hear it creaking, but I'm putting quite a lot of energy into that. Do the same with this piece of polyester resin. It's a similar thickness to the other one, honest. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. So let's see what happens. Yeah, so when you stress it, you get a crack forming on the surface, and it just runs right the way through immediately. So the difference here is when we bend it, you can hear it creaking, but what happens is the crack starts from the surface, and then it very soon arrives at one of these fibres, and that fibre, the energy dissipates. Well, does it dissipate along the fibre? But the fibre stops the crack progressing through the material, so it can locally start to delaminate on the fibres, but it's so much stronger. Don't know whether I can break this small piece. Oh, I can. Okay, this is the boot. You can see where the hinges fix and the lock. It's double skinned. The shape of the inside. So that's not the top surface. It is double skinned, so they're joined at the edge. You can see the recess for the hinge and the lock, the other hinge, and a bobbin where the boot retainer, when you open the boot, holds it up. Here's one of the doors. So where the door handle and lock come through, you'll notice some filler up here. I assumed that round hole was correct when I did all the work on the door, and it's only when I test fitted the door handle that I realised it wasn't. They must have had filler in. When I stripped it all back, I must have taken the filler out and not realised. So, a bit frustrating, but there we are. So I've turned it around so we can see the other side. So that's where the door handle goes and the lock. Some bobbins in here. These three is what the door lock mechanism assembly fixes to. You can see that in detail later on. These holes have rubber threaded inserts go into them to hold the door trim. This recess, there's a couple of bobbins, still a screw in that one, hold the window lifting mechanism, which I believe was used in London taxis. So it's a spring mechanism, so you just manually move the window up and down and it stays in the position you leave it in. A couple more bobbins here that the front part of the window frame fixes to. A couple of bobbins there as well that the rear window runner fixes to. That little wooden plate I think is where the window bottoms out. And then at the front we've got access holes which give access to the two hinge pins. Can't really call them pins, but the nylon half rounds. You can see that when it's assembled. There's a couple of bobbins top and bottom to hold the casting that holds those in, and these to give access to get to the screws that will hold those into place and make the adjustments. Again, a hole to give access to make adjustments. Not for a speaker, might look like it's for a speaker for a radio or something, but not this age. And then there's a little recess where a 10-ax fitting fixes to the outside to hold a tonneau cover, should it be fitted. And then there's a recess channel here which is for water to run down, and this sort of lip that a rubber door seal bonds to. I don't think the door sealing is very good. When you read about it and hear people talk about it, it seems they're pretty leaky. Okay, so that's the inside of a door. Oh, double skinned, I should say. Pretty obvious. But the two parts were bonded together, I think whilst they were still wet in the moulds. And oh yes, another feature point out. On this panel I've oversprayed it, which is probably stupid of me. Partially oversprayed it, but there's a number written here, 3-figure number. It's the body number, so 4, that's a 7, or it was, and that was a 3, and that was a 3, so 4733, which should be a match for the body number, which is there. These are the light pods, so that's the shape. You just see that back edge when it's fitted. Of course they pop up that way. The drainage hole there, and holes for the lamps to fix in, and a couple of bobbins you can see on the inside, which are the pivot points. And there's a hole there that a spring fixes to, well, not just a spring, but the vacuum unit that pulls the whole light pod up and down. The way they pivot, these bobbins are threaded and they engage, a screw goes through those and engages with bobbins in the body, which you can see here. Those are also threaded, so you feed the screw from the inside of the pod out into those. So you've got to get the screws in the right position to position the pod sideways in that hole. So there's an adjustment sideways, but not backwards and forwards. So they've got to be pretty accurately positioned in the mouldings. Okay, here's one, same idea, just handed. It's the battery box, we saw it earlier, haven't primed it, it's just finished, but with the filler ready for priming. So These are a couple of bits of trim that go on the doors. So there's a pair of them. They're odd things really. They sort of look logical once they're fixed to the door. I have to say they are not really very well matched as a pair if we put them together. Just sit them together. You can see how different they are. They're originally out of the car, so I assume that's what they were like as they were manufactured new. But yeah, quite a different size. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out when we trim the doors. Okay, there's a, I think there was, yeah there is, I've just filled it at the moment. There's a little hole at this end. So this part at the front acts as a bit of a drainage channel. I think that's the idea, towards the front of the door. And there's a little hole, and there was a tube bonded to the inside of that, just a bit of plasticky rubber tube glued in place, so water can run down and then feed out through the bottom of the door, I think. Anyway, we'll find out more about that when I put it all back together. These are the cant rails that hold the roof, soft roof in place. We've got some bobbins in them, as you can see, and there's a fancy bracket fixes to the front edge. You'll see when it's assembled there's a pin that locates it in the bodywork, and a sort of 10-ax fitting fixes on there that locates it onto the body. There's a load of holes missing which press studs would fit to for the soft top roof to clip to. Same idea on the other side. This is the front windscreen frame, which bolts to the body of Series 1 or 2, unlike the Series 3 or 4 where it's an integral part of the body. See where it bolts on. It's got bobbins on this side. On that upright there is some metalwork inside it. You could see it when I was preparing it. It's like a perforated piece of metal. To give it some extra strength, I guess. I'm not convinced it's that very strong, really. In the top edge there's a slot, which is where the soft top would locate into, and the hard top for that matter. And some various holes where the fittings for the hood and the cant rails go. On the inside, let's turn it round. So that's the fixing point for the mirror and where a wire runs down onto the bottom of the frame, which I've covered in masking tape. So there's a wire that pulls the top of the frame down onto the windscreen. This is the air box that fixes to the intake of the carburetors. So sheet metal part and fiberglass part. So this was originally moulded with a black gel coat, so it wasn't painted. Unfortunately this one had cracked at the bottom, so I had to make a repair. So going to have to have it painted, sadly. So I've just sort of prepared it ready for paint. So it needs priming and properly finishing. There's a bobbin in the centre, so the bolt comes through there into the bobbin at this side and clamps it on. There's a rubber seal that goes around here that gives you a good seal against that. Gives you a good seal against the metal part. Okay. These are the bumper bars. They've been painted, as you can see. The rear one has got the holes for those drainage tubes from the rear boot gutter, which go through. just drain out the bottom side. I've got a bobbin which is full of paint which I need to clear out where it fixes, and the front one has got bobbins in the end where a bolt passes through to fix it to the body. And the inside of them are filled with foam. So that's the original foam from 1966. Okay.